It's hardly breaking news that 2017 was a really bad year for the media, but how deep and how lasting is the damage? I put those troubling questions to our panel. Joining us now, Gail Trotter, a contributor to Daily Caller and The Hill. Ed Henry, Fox's chief national correspondent. And in New York, Jessica Tarloff, senior director at Bustle.com. And Gail, how much credibility have the media lost this year alone, and is much of that distrust among conservatives?
Yes, it's been a really tough year for the media and its credibility, 2017. And when you think about independent investigative journalism, we haven't seen kind of the death of that this past year.
The death of it?
The death of it.
There's been a lot of stories that have been labeled investigative reporting.
Labeled that way, but do they have the evidence, and are they all leaning in one particular way? And you ask about how conservatives are reacting to this. You had Bill Buckley for decades talking about how the mainstream media was disinclined to fairly and accurately report conservative policies, and we see the proof of that with high-profile mistake after high-profile mistake.
We will get to some of those high-profile mistakes, but Jessica, many on the left not happy with the media either, as the Trump presidency has played out.
Well, this is universal. I would certainly not say that this is the death of investigative reporting. I think that we've seen some major successes, most notably with the stories that came out of Alabama with the women accusing Roy Moore of sexual harassment and child molestation in one case, two cases, I think, actually. But certainly the media credibility has taken a hit, and that's happened on both sides of the aisle. I think along with that, government officials have taken a further hit on their credibility as well. And I understand why the public just generally feels like no one is telling them the truth and that they have to find some way to seek that out. That has led to, I think, even more partisanship with people just going to whatever feels comforting to them.
Right. Hey, there's no question that media credibility has suffered every year, particularly this year. How much of that is President Trump branding what he calls fake news? And is that applied to stories that are reckless, biased, rushed, or also stories he doesn't like?
A big share of it is about President Trump, whether it's fake news or not. I think my point being that he's the lightning rod at the center of this sort of media maelstrom, if you will. And I think part of the problem for the media right now, writ large, particularly the political journalists, is that there's just such a rush to find anything on him, anything at all. Some legitimate. This special counsel investigation, there have been legitimate scoops. There's a legitimate investigation there. But then when you find the lack of credibility at the FBI, the let's get him, the anti-Trump text, there are mainstream media outlets who simply don't cover that. And then you look at this massive story by Politico in recent days suggesting that the former President Barack Obama let Hezbollah off the hook. And people are going to debate what's accurate, what's not about it. But it's a massive piece. The nightly news of the three major networks simply didn't cover it.
Gail, you mentioned mistakes, and I don't exclude Fox News here, but CNN had three big ones this year. The most recent one about a WikiLeaks email to Donald Trump Jr. It turned out to be nothing because of the details. The wrong prediction on what James Comey was going to testify as far as President Trump. And then that Anthony Scaramucci story that led to the firing of 3 staffers. And then ABC's Brian Ross, suspended for 4 weeks over a false story on Mike Flynn. Does this just affect the news organizations involved, or does it collectively affect the whole news business?
Well, if you look at how the media has done in the past year, there was a lot of discussion about whether they would take a hit from the president targeting these news organizations. And yet you see that their ratings are going up and they're drawing a lot more viewers because people are really interested in politics in 2017. So perversely, they're losing their credibility, but at the same time, they're drawing a lot of people who really are caring about this debate and want to understand the policy and the thinking behind the arguments of the time. So it's this this kind of confusing situation where you have more interest and you have more of an obligation to be objective, and yet you see that it's less objective.
Well, I would argue that every mistake tarnishes all of us. Not that everybody's responsible for somebody's flawed or biased reporting, but it does kind of darken the image. And Jessica, there are instances where journalists get the story right, but then they get hammered on social media because people think they don't believe them, or they are buying into conspiracy theories, or or they just are sort of on the other team, so to speak?
Yeah, absolutely. I was going to say that I think that this fake news moniker that the president, as Ed pointed out there, coined himself is really dangerous to the business of truth, which is what journalism is all about, right? Uncovering things and presenting them fairly. And we know the difference between reporters and opinion journalists, and I think that has gotten a little bit blurred over the last year, certainly since the Trump ascendancy. And to your point about how when there is a mistake at an ABC, at a CNN, at a Fox, at an MSNBC, wherever it is, it does tarnish the entire industry, because it's not like every poll doesn't pull out, oh, how do you feel specifically about this outlet?
Right.
They talk about the news media.
But Jessica, the thing is that President Trump didn't coin the phrase fake news. The media coined that.
But he popularized it.
He changed it. He took the phrase fake news. No, he took it, and he, like in a jujitsu type move, was able to take it and turn it against the media. So it was something that the media created, and he was able to turn it against the media.
Weaponized it, basically.
No.
I like that line.
Yes.
Let me jump in here, because it's not just about Donald Trump. The New York Times this year had to retract and apologize for an editorial that blamed Sarah Palin.
Yeah.
This
Right.
is in the aftermath of the shooting of the congressional Republicans at that baseball field, for having incited the shooting in Tucson that wounded Gabby Giffords and killed other people. The Times won the lawsuit, but it looked blatantly political.
Right, it does. And let me connect both questions, because where I agree with Jessica is that where the president has to be careful, I think, as a member of the media, is that when there's a story that may or may not be true, but it's just that he disagrees with the premise of it and he calls it fake news, you can't just call it fake news because you don't like the story. If it's genuinely false, genuinely fake, it's fair game. Go after it. But you're right with the New York Times. Part of it is just this fervor to get him no matter what, with things big and small. In that case, Sarah Palin, go after conservatives, big and small. I'll give you a great example. There's this chyron from CNN floating around from earlier this year that people have been making fun of. It says, you know, Trump has 2 scoops of ice cream, comma, others have 1. Okay? Now, that's
And
not...
you don't think that's real news?
Well, I'll tell you, I'll put it this way. Actually, I'm going to surprise you. It's not fake news, because it's based on a Time magazine article where they sat down and had dinner.
But is
However,
that worthy? Is that worthy?
Exactly, that is my point.
Yes.
Why? It's just like he has 2 scoops of ice cream, so let's make a big deal of it.
Final data point to punctuate
With a
this.
Diet Coke.
Yeah.
Politico poll this year, 46% believe the media fabricates stories about President Trump, but here's the split. 76% of Republicans say yes, 65% of Democrats say no. Thanks very much.